At some point, man, I remember hearing some of those rates were like what we made in an hour is what you could pay them for a day.
Hmm.
Start doing that kind of math, and you're thinking, well, for 8 hours a day, I can hire 8 artists a day,
Yeah.
extrapolate that, and then they have rotating shifts where they pay no one overtime.
Yeah. Well, and also the other thing, there were not just tax subsidies to ship work out to India and other Asian countries, but there's also the tax evasion side of things because parent company from America can't own a company in India. And
Mhm.
because of that, they had to be separate entities, but they could be owned by a corporate entity. So then you wouldn't be taxed as an American company, you would be taxed as an Indian company. When the jobs were getting shipped overseas, America is required to tax all of the work that comes back in, which was meant for manufacturing, but for manufacturing jobs that kept getting shipped overseas, so that you basically don't gain any money by hiring overseas workers as opposed to American workers. And the whole point for that was to incentivize keeping the work in America so that we didn't have our working class end up being our homeless class. And that worked pretty well for the States for
Yeah.
manufacturing, but they never did that for visual effects. As those visual effects jobs went overseas and went out of the country, not overseas, they're supposed to be taxed for any work that comes back in. So any of those films that are distributed in the States are supposed to be taxed to make sure that any gains they get by shipping those jobs overseas are offset by the additional taxes they have to pay by screening those films in the States. But they never did that, whether that's VFX or 3D conversion. Since America did not have our back, our jobs disappeared. The VFX industry and 3D conversion industry used to be many times larger than they are now. And people with our level of
Mhm.
experience were paid significantly better than we are right now.
Oh, for sure.
And that's dollar amount, not even looking into inflation.
Like the whole globalization market, it changed a lot of
Hmm.
stuff. The moment we start to say, okay, why don't we outsource this type of work, whether it be factory work from back in the day? Technology keeps advancing so quickly that as we constantly see, and I'm pretty sure we'll go into depth later, our government always is a step behind, like a few steps behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, other international markets try to do better. That's why the conversion thing happened so quickly. It was a big thing, and now most of
Hmm.
it's overseas. Yeah, we do touch upon outsourcing sooner than I thought we would, but
Yeah.
the fact that outsourcing was beginning to happen, that we work with more outside vendors outside the US, that's why the pandemic shifted a lot of things after that, and then the strikes, and now AI, and now with the unions coming up. All of that are things that we really want to dive into and expand upon because all of that is huge in terms of what's shaping VFX for the coming years.
There's an article that just came out with AI basically said that about 80% of the post-production industry for film is going to be gone in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's wild. I think that's why we're seeing so many major studios suddenly starting to unionize. But I heard even for the actor strikes, they didn't get full protections against AI either.
Oh yeah, no, they hadn't. However, there were some cases that had already gone before the Supreme Court in which actors were protected. Crispin Glover in Back to the Future, because in Back to the Future 1, he was in it. In Back to the Future 2, they tried to undercut his pay, and he was like, no, I'm not doing it for that. And they said, well, fine, then we're going to find somebody that looks a lot like you. And we already did face molds of your face when we were doing some of the makeup work to be able to test it out properly. And they were like, so we're just going to use the molds that we have to do prosthetics on this other guy. And he's really good at doing an impression of your voice. So he's just going to pretend to be you. basically the Supreme Court was like, no, you can't steal someone's identity like that. You can't use prosthetics to match their face. You can't mimic their voice to make it seem like it's still them. You can have this other guy step
Mm,
in and be that actor, and that's fine. But you can't steal this guy's
yeah.
identity and make it seem like he's acting in this film when he's not, because an actor's identity is what they sell. That's how they market themselves. So yeah, I mean, for
Hmm.
voiceover artists, for actors, even though there may not be AI specific cases that are covered, there have been cases seen before the Supreme Court saying you own your identity and no one can copy your identity without your explicit permission to the extent that you allow it. So at least that is protected for actors and voiceover artists. But for anybody in post, man, good luck. Writers are another thing that, I mean, they didn't have pretty much any protections, and they pretend AI can do just as good of a job as the writers that are already on these projects. And I mean, some of these projects are really roughly done, so maybe, but any talented artist, any talented writer is not going to be able to be outdone by AI because there is a human element to their writing in a unique style. Well, I don't want to get too into AI because I know that's a very long conversation.